So we've discussed two aspects, that the two faculties that we want to improve in the world are chen and cheshivus, the things that people like and the things that people are worried about, that there should be more truth underlying these feelings, these tendencies. And the first part of the lesson discusses primarily the process of improving the chen in the world, which is that in our own life that we perceive before judging, that before deciding if we like or we don't like something, we just take in a little bit of arbitrary information, a little objective information about the situation. And in order to do that, we have to open our hearts, which practically means clearing away for a moment our predisposed ideas. We don't have to be afraid they're going to go away forever, just for a moment, so that we can get a little bit of pure information. We've also began to discuss the avoida, the work of improving cheshivus, the things that people are concerned with in the world, and this things that people respect in the world. And this is a process of the same way that we look at the world and we have to gather a little bit of information before deciding how we feel about something. Well, why do we need to know how we feel about something? So that we know how to act with regard to that thing. And we know what decisions to make regarding that thing. And so there's another little bit of a pause that we have to make. It's only a little bit. We don't have to worry that we're going to spend all day doing this and not have any time to act practically. But there's a little bit of a pause. We have to consider what is the actual proper, kosher thing for me to do in this situation, and what determines whether something's kosher. The Torah determines whether something's kosher. So this is our standard by which we evaluate our decisions. And there's a factor that makes this not necessarily difficult, but a factor that we have to account for. And this factor is accounted for it's symbolized in a story of an ancient sage, Rabbi Bar Chana, who explained his bizarre stories to Rabbi Nachman in dreams, and so that Rabbi Nachman could then explain the lessons to the world, which they hadn't necessarily been understood, at least not explained to the degree that Rabbi Nachman explains them in the maybe 1500 years or something like that since they occurred. So in this particular story, Rabbi Bar Chana is on a boat, and a big wave comes to sink the boat, and he has a staff that has the name of Hashem written on it, and this staff causes the wave to break. Now there's something unusual about this wave, which is that it has a little bit of a white flame on the end of the wave. And Rabbi Nachman says that the little white flame is a harmful angel. It's an angel, okay, so that makes you think it's good, but it's also a harmful angel. So we have to understand exactly what sort of harm is this angel trying to do this. Well, I'm not on a boat, so if it sends a big wave, I'm not anywhere near open water, so sending a wave isn't seemingly going to affect me much. But what's the wave? The wave is perceived reality. That there's, in Torah we say that there's the pashat, there's the simple meaning of the words, the simple, how'd the story go? If there's a legal dispute, what are the basic details of the dispute before we get into any extended discussion about the idea. And so this harmful angel comes in and tells us what's going on. And it definitely doesn't always tell us the truth. That would be very helpful if it did that. But it also doesn't always lie to us, because then we could just think the opposite. It would be easy. Essentially, someone who always tells a blatant lie is sort of always telling the truth, because you just flip around what they said and you get the truth. But no, it's trickier than that. The previous Rebbe of Chabad described the evil inclination as a klugener, the clever one. So sometimes it lies, and sometimes it tells the truth. And we have to determine whether it's lying or whether it's telling the truth. And our ability to determine this is represented by this staff that Rabbi Bar Chana had on his boat, fortunately. That was able to break up this wave so it didn't sink. And Rabbi Nachman explains what would sinking mean in our lives, since I'm not in a boat. That the chen and cheshivus, the things people like and are worried about in the world, is something that we need to be in a constant state of uplifting for the very clear betterment of society that would bring. And if we're not actively doing that, it will sink. The word for sink and the word for nature in Hebrew are the same word. It's the same word root. So if we just leave it up to nature, nature does not improve the chen chashivus. Humans need to exercise our free choice in order to do that. Okay. So the staff, Rabbi Nachman says that the staff is like the Torah. The staff that, one, the Torah makes us smart. If you've ever learned Gemara, you're smarter literally that day. Literally, as soon as you're done learning Gemara, you got smarter. You process you made new logical procedures in your mind, you thought of a new situation in a very critical way, and already your mind is sharper. And this gives us the ability to be slightly skeptical of the harmful angel, right? Sort of from the onset. To be slightly skeptical of our own first impressions, which it's really not our own. Actually, Rabbi Nachman says, no, it's actually a foreign, it's like this alien coming to you and telling you it. So that's our gut reaction to things, is our first impression is this alien coming. So the Torah gives us the ability to be smart about that. And also, of course, to be smart about determining our own actions. But it seems to be that the Torah is being presented as some sort of a weapon here. And so the Torah is, well, so it first came down as luchos, as these tablets. And what was the size of these tablets? The size of these tablets was 6 by 6. If you should ask what the third dimension was, they were 6 by 6 by 3. But if you put two of them together, it's 6 by 6 by 6. So every dimension of these two tablets combined was 6, and 6 corresponds to the Hebrew letter Vav, which is like shaped like a staff. So that's clearly the staff that Rabbi Bar Chana had was a Vav. And it also means and in Hebrew. So first, there's a lesson here concerning the ways that the Torah is helping us in this situation to determine our surroundings and also to determine our behavior. And that's only two things. And it's similar to what Rabbi Nachman said at the beginning of the lesson, that chen and chashivus, it's only two things. Even at the very beginning, the verse that starts the whole lesson, Ashrei Timim Midarcha Hoylechim B'Torah Hashem, those who walk in the Torah of Hashem. When you walk left, right, there's not a third thing. And yet, the Lucha is actually, so Rabbi Nachman quotes a piece of the Gemara, but he doesn't finish the quote. He chooses very carefully what to quote, and he lists only two dimensions. I said the third dimension outside, but Rabbi Nachman didn't include that detail. There is a third dimension here. There could be many other factors. We could discuss the materials that the stones are made out of, and we could discuss the way that the writing was done. And there are many factors to discuss about these stones that the Torah was written upon initially. But all that Rabbi Nachman chooses to mention are these two things. And so there's this idea that the world is a narrow bridge, or that man has to cross a narrow bridge. And part of the bridge is that it has two sides. So this is a very common theme, not only in Torah's Breslov, but in Pesukim, in the Torah in general. Most Pesukim are in two parts. Ashrei Timim Midarach, Hoylechim B'Torah Hashem. And you can break down nearly any pasuk in that way. Actually, when you're reading from the Torah, it's written without the punctuation or the vowel sounds. And the melody that the reader does not have to be exactly perfect. Of course, it's good if it is. But there are rules about what we must correct them and what we don't need to correct them. And the only things that we are obligated to correct them about in the recitation of the melody part of the reading are the middle and the end of each pasuk. So the pasuk is the verse is divided into two sections. Okay. So even though there's two, these are all of the dimensions. If somebody wants to come and say, well, the third dimension of the Luchos is 3, yeah, but if you put 3 and 3 together, it's 6. So essentially, we can fight off all sorts of Yetzer Hara with these two vavs.
Could you repeat what the two vavs were? Because I lost
Yeah, the dimensions of the luchos. It's 6 by 6. The language Arachin Vav Rachavin Vav. 6 long,
Physical
6
dimensions.
wide. Physical dimensions of right. Okay. So this represents the staff that has the names of Hashem that are written on it. And the world is made out of the Torah. This is one of the, it's a statement in Zohar. Hashem kind of took the Torah like a blueprint for the world, so to speak. Or maybe you could think of it as a, like you shine a light through a little hole and then you see a bigger light on the wall, but actually it's the hole that you're shining light through that's producing that shape. So the world is sort of like that, sort of like a projection of the Torah. And the whole Torah is names of Hashem. So there's no svara, there's no line of reasoning to say that if I take in enough information, if I just keep on gathering information, eventually I will come to the ultimate truth. Because literally every direction that we could look, there was like a name of Hashem, which is essentially an incomprehensible thing. One name of Hashem we could never completely comprehend. Not to mention, I'm going to look and I'm going to gather every single one of them. So there's sort of a double meaning here to this vav. This vav is the staff, which is that there's two vavs, there's two ands, we have to say. The harmful angel presents to us one version of reality, which is and give our take on it. And then also there's sort of a gut reflex about what to do in a situation. And the Torah says, but we only need those two ands. We could keep going and this and that and this and that. And we could sort of get lost in this game. We could do it in either phase. There's the phase of the looking upon reality and determining what's really going on here, and I could do that all day and then never actually act. And also once I have information about the situation, okay, I do that well, and I move on to the next part, which is determining how I will act. But I could have analysis paralysis there too. So this staff that's shaped like the letter Vav, which represents the concept of literally the word and, it has two sides to it. One is that it's a weapon, which prevents me from sort of getting the wrong idea from this harmful angel, meaning sort of my gut reflex about things. But it also is a walking stick. Rabbeinu makes a point of saying that the vav is suras makel. It is the shape of a stick, literally. And a stick and this is something that you use for walking. Literally, the word makel is something that's kal, that is easy. A stick is something that makes it easier for you. So it isn't only a weapon. It also helps us to walk in the Torah of Hashem. Not to jump or do backflips or sprint in the Torah of Hashem or do something that would require more than two legs. So it also helps us stay sane. I think I brought this up last time, that there's two statements in Likutei Moharan. One that says that the Yetzer Hara wants to kill a guy, and the other says it wants to drive a guy crazy. So one of the commentaries, the Bir Likutei, says, well, what does it want to do? Does it want to, driving someone crazy is not a nice thing to do, but it's not nearly as taking it as far as killing them. So what's the answer? Well, the Bir Likutei says there's two Yetzer Haras. One wants to drive a guy crazy. So we could defeat this wave and not get a wrong gut impulse about a situation, but then sort of go crazy with this. But we need to walk in the Torah of Hashem, and that's why we have this and. So our self-defense and our self-sustaining tool here is the concept of and. Now, the two ands, we don't need more ands than that. And, okay. There's a phrase that's used in Poiskim, in the legal writings, where one rabbi will explain a concept at great length, and then another rabbi will say, will sort of summarize briefly what they said, and then say, and they were gam, or they were game too much. They just kept going on and adding this and adding that and adding this, when really the main point they were saying was actually this phrase. Okay, so everything around us, and also everything around us to some extent is names of Hashem, which are sort of incomprehensible, but even to a greater extent, our own behavior, which is directly determined by the Torah, as opposed to sort of a projection that then we're looking at. There's an idea of a tzimtzum, which is like you've got the tzaddik, and then you've got the student of the tzaddik. So if you learn from the tzaddik directly, this is without any sort of tzimtzum, without any sort of contraction. But you can't always access the tzaddik. So sometimes you have to go to the student of the tzaddik, and sometimes you can't access that guy, so the student of the student, and sometimes you can't get to that guy, so you need to just read his book. And all of these are further and further contractions. So there's just an idea of an illustration of the concept of contraction here, what means tzimtzum in our case. And in our case, we're saying that the world is produced by the Torah, but it is through its tzimtzum, that it is sort of a projection of the Torah. Our own actions are, how much more so, are determined directly by the Torah. And so it's very important to remember that everything in the Torah is a name of Hashem, that we will not ever come to the ultimate truthful understanding, but what we can do that's very helpful is to improve somewhat our current understanding. And that way it's like we're walking up a staircase, one step at a time. Right? If we make the step too high, then we can't go to that stair. There are certain tefillin that are very holy to wear, but one who has any sort of bodily emission that makes their body not clean cannot wear them. So look, I mean, we're human beings here. So if I jump right to something like that, or I mean, there are tzaddikim that fast every day except for Shabbos. Okay, so that may be an extremely high level of truth, but that's a little maybe too high for what I'm ready for. So we have stair steps here. So as much as it is important to remember with our surroundings that everything is names of Hashem, and therefore we can get some more information than we have now, but it is at the end of the day incomprehensible, how much more so with our own actions. A person can go somewhat mad looking at their surroundings more deeply than is necessary. A person can go much more mad determining their own behaviors. Okay, so what causes a person to make bad decisions? Rabbi Nachman goes on to say here that he quotes a famous Gemara that says nobody makes any sort of bad decision unless a spirit of folly enters them. Rabbi Nachman says that in his own words before that anybody who does a sin is insane. It is insanity that causes any sort of bad decision. So we often try to take a Band-Aid solution to this and only try to correct bad decisions. And that is a valuable effort, and we should desire to want to improve our decisions. And I mean, when I'm saying bad decisions, I don't necessarily mean on a big life, I bought the wrong house or I went to the wrong college or something huge like that. Although this is also relevant to big things like that, but again, we're walking into Hashem here. So, let's say that I put on my tefillin in the wrong order or something. I put my head tefillin on, and then I put my arm tefillin on, or something like that. Even that, if the strap on my head tefillin was turned around backwards, it doesn't seem like that hurts anybody, but between man and God, that is actually considered to be a sin. So what causes these things to occur? We can try to I'm going to be really makpid on myself and stubborn on myself, never to put my tefillin on the wrong way, and never to make any sort of mistake in the davening that I would have to repeat something and then accidentally imply that there's two authorities or something like that. But we don't need to crack the whip like that necessarily, and actually that's a thing that can drive a person mad. This is the thing that the Yetzer Hara does, is it makes a person sin, but then it makes them be hard on themselves about the sin. But Rabbeinu Zal is saying something else. No, it's not the sin that causes the sin. It's the insanity that causes the sin. So if you remove the insanity, which is actually presenting a fairly straightforward way of doing that, with just this concept of and. There's one and and there's another and. First of all, if I don't do the ands at all, if I just take the situation as is given to me, I will only be mildly insane. If I take it too far, if I do an and on the situation, I do an and on my behavior, and then I do an and I do another and I do another and then I factor in all these things that are remotely, I can become quite insane and maybe not really do anything. But it is not explicitly stated in here that a mild insanity or a severe insanity produces more sin, one or the other. Who's to say that the quantity of insanity necessarily determines the quantity of the misgivings of the bad decisions? So we don't need to be afraid that if I start to apply this, I'll do a little bit of and in the situation, a little bit of and with my own behavior, that then I'm going to take it too far and wind up much worse than I was before I did the and. Because if we don't know, we have to say it's 50-50. Yes, either type of insanity will lead a person to do things they shouldn't have done, but we don't need to make calculations about which one is more severe. Two ands. That's all I have to do is two ands.
Insane paralysis of ends.
Yeah.
Well said from the psychology.
Shameless. Okay. So what do you have to do with a crazy person? We have to, so the staff here now is being used in a sort of a metaphorical way. He says you have to hit them with the staff, meaning that we have to have a little bit of a snap out of it moment. And we have to place upon the crazy person names. So namely ourselves here we're talking about. So it's another way of saying, at least I read it as another way of saying, of a very similar idea, which is that we have to, when we place upon ourselves this staff of and, we have to remember that all the ands are actually names of God, and therefore utterly incomprehensible. And so, again, and I think it's a message about not taking it too far. Okay, so then also in our actual learning of Torah. So when one learns Torah, they also have these two levels of staffs and ands, which is that we do have to put a little bit of effort to learn a little bit more deeply what's going on in the Sefer, but not to the point that we can't go forward with the Sefer. There's two things to say about this. One is that if you really understand a Sefer, you understand not only what's written in it, but why it's written there. And so that's the thing to think about. I understand that Rabbeinu Zal wrote here that the toiling in Torah has within it staffs and names. And now I just have to think about one other thing, which is why did he just say that? Why is that an important thing for me to know? The idea of a staff being the idea of going a little bit deeper, and the idea of names being the idea of knowing that it is ultimately infinite. The alternative is the guy who sits in the shir for 5 minutes and he hears something amazing, and he's so amazed by it, he gets up and he leaves. So he can go tell people about it and expound or meditate upon this concept out in the woods or something like that. And it's nice that he wants to go deeper, but he hasn't received the complete idea yet. And the solution to this is to know that it's all names of Hashem, and that he's not going to find the final answer meditating upon it in the woods. And when he does want to meditate upon the concept in the woods, he'll be much better equipped to do so if he has a few more staffs here, a little bit more information about the situation, things to be makel his path, to make it easier for him to walk. This idea that the name of Hashem represents an infinity, that doesn't mean that we have no access to it. As we've discussed, we can clarify the situation and behavior a little bit, and deeper than that too. I mean, we can find totally life-changing ideas and things that will make us smarter and things that will give us better personal qualities and all these things by sort of sticking our head into the infinite. But when we go into the infinite, go into any particular name of Hashem, we have to have a staff, we have to have a walking stick, so that we can go in a balanced way. The way will be eased for us, otherwise it's too difficult. The letter Vav, well, we talked a little bit about the idea of a tzimtzum. The letter Vav helps me, it is a tzimtzum. In the primary name of Hashem, Yud and Hey, and Vav and Hey. The Yud and the Hey, the top two letters, essentially represent the heavens. There's an inconceivable essence. It's how it says in Sefer Bereshis that a river comes out of Eden and it waters the garden. What's Eden? What's going on in there? So that's like the Yud. Nobody really knows what's going on in there exactly, but we know about the river that comes out and it waters the garden, and that's the heavens, and so that's the first Hey. But still, we don't seem to live in heaven exactly. We look around and we see not always heavenly things. We live in a place called earth. And so how do we bring some of heaven down to earth? Well, we need a Vav between them. The higher Hey in Hashem's name is the heavens, which is essentially, you can think of it as a completely perfect earth. It is earth-like. There are trees, there are grasses, there are things that we have on earth, but there's no problems. That's one thing that's different about heaven than earth. So how do we bring some of that down to the earth? Well, earth is the lower Hey in Hashem's name, and there's a Vav between them. So each Vav, Rabbi Nachman says here that when we work in the Torah, that this has within it staffs. It's plural. Each Vav is another piece of information. So when we're delving into the infinite, each piece of information sort of helps to put rungs on the ladder, so to speak. Like the dream, yeah.
So Vav is like a connection, and it relates to the Lukos.
Right.
Well, 6 by 6. So it's,
right.
So is the Torah a connection between heaven and earth? Is that?
If we utilize it as such, the Torah can, like it says in the Gemara, that the Torah is not in heaven. So that is talking about the correct way of learning the Torah. Rabbi Nachman is discussing here that we're gathering pieces of information from the Torah that give us insight into the infinite. However, if we get sort of deer in the headlights about it, we don't want to be in this place where the Torah is in heaven and it's not accessible to us. And we also don't want to have this idea that the Torah is just completely on earth and it doesn't make a ladder, although at least then we can learn it. But what you're saying, for the Torah to function as a connection between heaven and earth, we need rungs on the ladder. And these are the fact that each piece of information we get from the Torah, it's a Vav. And so that puts another rung on the ladder. But we remember that this is a ladder to the infinite. So it isn't the Tower of Babel here. It's not something that we can finish. Because if it's something that we can finish, if it's something finite, then it's not necessarily something that's going to yield to us these great novelties about reality. These are things that are already sort of in reality. But the Torah is specifically helping us to bring down this novel state of perfection, because perfection is the novel state as far as the world is concerned. We can solve a specific problem, but there's still other problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that perfection has been achieved. Perfection is sort of an abstract notion. So if we want to get new ways of sort of making perfection, and we go into the Torah with this attitude that we're gathering pieces of information that help us connect to the infinite. It isn't that we are gathering pieces of the infinite. Now it's like if I subtract 1 from a billion, well now a billion is 1 less, right? It's not like I took 1. When you subtract 1 from infinity, it's still infinity, and that'll never not be infinity. And so in this way of gathering information that helps us connect with the infinite, we bring the heaven down to earth. We connect the heaven and the earth. So that perfection is something that can be found in the world. Another one of the Rebbeim of Chabad says that he writes about mystical concepts in great detail, and he says specifically that you should learn about mystical concepts the same way that you learn about physical concepts. And with the same degree of details. Well, if my cow attacks your cow, who has to pay for what? Well, which cow prompted the other cow? What's the cow's reputation? Does it go around attacking other cows? What's the weight of your cow? What's the age of your cow? All these different details. What kind of field were they in? Did you do something to upset your cow? All these details that we need, we should also learn about the infinite in a similar way. When we read the Arizal, we say, well, then Chachma and Bina come down and form the top 2/3 of Tiferes, and then the bottom third of Tiferes, because it's extremely detailed. And all of these details are within, they are gifts that are given to us that each help us relate to the infinite within our context affinity. And this is what defeats the Yetzer Hara. Both the Yetzer Hara is the one that says don't look any deeper. It's not worth it. And the one that says, oh yeah, hell, keep looking, go crazy, go ahead. We have this balance. Okay, so now we're in the last paragraph of the lesson. In the last paragraph, Rabbi Nachman is going to re-explain to us the verse that started this lesson from David HaMelech. So what does Ashrei Tamimi Darech mean? Ashrei is a language of looking. So the way of perfecting the path is achieved by looking. But before, when we read this, before we had read through the lesson, understood the two concepts presented here about how to increase the likability and concern, the chen chashivas, how to increase the quality of these things. We read that Ashrei Tamimi Darech, or the people who go on the path, people who do things in a worldly way, and they can achieve happiness, Ashrei, in this way. But Rabbi Nachman completely changes it around now. So Ashrei is a language of looking. And in that way, to Mime, we actually make the path truly perfect. Because now we have the tool to bring this state of perfection into physical vessels.
What is the link between Ashrei and looking in the word itself? Is there any hint of that?
I have a book that has the answer to that question. I don't know here. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Essentially, it means I will approve. Shrei is something is sharei, and that means that it's approved. It means it's mutar. So it's something that is ma'ushar, has been approved also. So you see, like on these kosher phones, we don't actually have a thing that says, it's not called a hechsher because the word kosher usually refers to food. So instead of having a hechsher, it has a ma'ushar, which means that they checked it out. The rabbis looked into this phone, they see what does it have access to, are you able to put apps on it, can you get videos? No, it's only for calling people, it's the basic reason we have a phone. Okay, it's ma'ushar.
So Ashrei is you've looked at it, you've approved it. You've looked at it in a way that it's approved by the Torah. Is that what it's saying?
Similar to that, except just the conjugation of the word. I would say Ashrei is the looking. It's not past tense like the phone that says ma'ushar on it, but that's conjugated as ma'ushar, right? Which means that it has been looked at. Ashrei is the looking. And so it is the looking which is the perfection of the path, which is the bringing of heaven down to earth.
That suggests constantly relooking, no?
Yeah, it's the way that we look. So what modulates the chen and chashivas? What modulates in our personal life what we like and what we don't like, and whether we have good reasons for that, and also that of those around us, what they like and what they don't like, and if they have legitimately good reasons, and also in the world at large, as sort of the ripple effect comes into play. You pack both those things into one word, and it's ashrei. The way that we look at things is going to determine the quality of our looking will directly result in the quality of our likes and dislikes. And if our likes and dislikes are problematic, then our behavior will be problematic. And if we like and dislike things that are really based on very good reasons, we've actually done the looking, and the looking has been in a good quality way, in a way that gathers information to make a good call, but doesn't go insane. Then this is the perfection of darech, of the path, or of the world.
So could you say, happy is he who sees only the good in what he's looking at?
No, I wouldn't say that. That might be a Baal Shem Tov, the Kavort. But this is Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman he teaches a different lesson than the Baal Shem Tov. Remember, at the beginning of this, we're talking about Chen Chashivas. So we have to look, we have to perceive before judging, and then judge. We are determining what is good and bad, and we do say that some things are not desirable and either should be decreased, or should at least we should distance ourselves from them if we don't have the power to decrease them. But what we should see in everything is Chachma. What you said was Chesed. But Chachma precedes Chesed. And before good and bad comes just information, just the whatness of the thing. And I think that's what Rabbi Nachman wants us to see. If you translate Ashrei as happy, which I think here, Ashrei Tamimei Darech, just to translate it into English according to this, means something completely different. The way that you look is the perfection of the path, is the perfection of sort of the physical, tangible reality. It's determined based on the way you look. That Ashrei doesn't mean happy at all. It can also mean happy, or I've seen it translated as praiseworthy. Something that is ma'ushar, is approved, so we can be happy that we have it. But I think he's saying here that it's completely a language of looking. He doesn't say it's a language of looking at happiness, but it's just simply a language of looking, which is a huge chiddush, because we've always read that word as meaning happy. Okay. So Bechinas Yaakov Ishtam, we see that. So Yaakov is someone who, what does it mean that he's an Ishtam? He's a simple man. That's how we've always read that. He sits in his tent and he reads books and he doesn't go mess around with the world so much like Esav does. So, he stays off the street, so to speak. That's how we read the word Tam before. Now we read the word Tam as it means that he is a person of perfection, of perfectifying the things around him. Well, in response to your question, even though in the heavenly sequence of things, Chachma precedes Chesed, the whatness of things precedes the goodness of things. In history, in Jewish history, it seems to be presented in the opposite order, and it's okay because the Rizal says that based on a principle in Kabbalah, all sequences can go in either direction. So, first we have Avraham, and Avraham is Chesed. And Avraham has a good son and a troubled son. And then we have Yitzchak, and Yitzchak is Gevurah, and Yitzchak has a good son and he has a troubled son. And then we have Yaakov, and Yaakov is the only one who, as we've discussed a little bit about the idea of how can we relate to this idea in terms of Yosef, the son of Yaakov, that all of Yaakov's children were perfect children. They were perfect people.
How could a person be perfect?
What?
How could a person be perfect?
But it says in Torah.
It says?
It says, yeah.
Oh, well, how do you measure perfection?
You just came into the class, man. We've been going, yeah. So we said perfect. We've been talking about the idea of perfection for a while. Yeah, so I will say in a brief way.
No, just to answer the question.
Right.
How do you measure perfection?
Right. So it's step by step.
No, just answer the question.
And so I'm answering the question.
Show me how you measure perfection. I know I can measure the width.
So the way that you measure perfection is step by step.
No,
a gradual
how do you measure?
improvement.
What's the metric of measuring perfection?
The metric is step by step. If it isn't step by step, it won't achieve perfection.
If this person is perfect, then there must be a way of saying this person is perfect, this person is not perfect.
This person's improving, this person's not improving.
Is there what?
Improving.
Improving. Our person improving.
To answer your question on one foot, because you just came in the middle here.
I don't mind.
To answer your question on one foot, perfect means improving.
Really? That's an interesting definition.
Anyway.
So let's try to finish this.
No, but you're changing perfect, improving two different words and you're equating them.
No, but they're English, so I'm not worried. They're English, I'm not worried about that. With Lashon HaKodesh, I would medayek Lashon HaKodesh like you're doing, but I wouldn't medayek English in the same way.
He's saying
Anyway.
in Lashon HaKodesh, it's more clear to understand.
More clear, was it in Lashon HaKodesh?
No, I'm saying in Lashon HaKodesh I would not take two words and say they mean the same thing. In English I could give you a definition like that.
No, there's
if you read a definition in the dictionary, you get a sentence of words and it equals this one word.
No, they're not. Each word is different.
Right, but a combination of one word equals another word. That's what a definition is.
No such thing.
Okay, so I'll leave up to Shlomo what he wants to do now with this situation.
We want to finish this.
Right, we're learning Likutei Moharan now, so you're welcome to join us if you'd like to. Okay. So what does it mean that Yaakov was perfect? It means that he was a person who perfects things. This is our new understanding. Before, when we read Yaakov Ish Tam, we've always read that as that he was simple, he stayed off the streets, he didn't get into trouble like Esav did. But here we have a new read on it, that it means that he brings about a more perfected state of things with the way that he sees and relates with the world. And this is seichel. So Rabbi Nachman says here that this is what intellect is. Intellect is not a thing that we just use to kind of purposelessly bat around ideas. That doesn't, in a way that does not improve a situation, in the way that does not perfectify a situation. That's not called intellect at all, at least according to Rabbi Nachman. There are other people who define the word intellect maybe differently, but the lesson of Likutei Moharan here, that we don't have to worry that maybe if I'm applying these techniques in Likutei Moharan, I'm not applying my intellect. Rabbi Nachman says, well, this is exactly what intellect is. Going too far with the and game, as we discussed earlier, is it has left the getter of intellect. It is now in the getter of insanity. Okay.
Related to the story of the simpleton and the sophisticate?
Well, what's the story?
Simplicity versus sophistication.
Yeah, but not over simplicity though, because there does have to be the first two. Over simplicity on its own would be just taking the harmful angel, just taking the story that the harmful angel gives you, and not anding it. I was learning with my teacher something about the Likutei Halachos, and he was comparing Likutei Tefillos, the prayers written by Reb Nosson Zal, and he was comparing them to Tehillim. And we've gotten a lot of information revealed to us since the Tehillim are written. We didn't have, David and Melech knew all this stuff, but the regular person on the street didn't have the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Rishonim and the Achronim and the Chassidish Rebbeim and all these different writings. So at least within the words in a clear way, the Likutei Tefillos is able to include a lot of information that we wouldn't necessarily see this information in the simple words of the Tehillim. It's there, but we wouldn't recognize it. It's too enclosed. And so it's like he's bringing the learning into the davening. He's informing the davening with the learning. And somebody said, but isn't the ideal to be like sort of the simple guy who just walks into shul and reads Tehillim with tears in his eyes and doesn't understand the words? And isn't that sort of the highest level? Okay, but now put a Mishnah in front of that guy. What's that guy's learning going to be like? The guy who, knowing nothing, can come in and read Tehillim and actually actively cry for real when he doesn't. Now have him learn. It's going to be a whole new thing here. So yes, simple is a good thing, but we have a new definition of tam here, which means simple, which is an informed simplicity.
It's basically one and. You're saying
No,
look at something
two ends.
and
No, ekye asher ekye. So there's the and of I'm not going to take the Malach Hamazik's Peshat.
Yeah.
When the harmful angel gives me a gut
Yeah.
reflex how I see the situation, I'm going to challenge that just a little bit. And also in my own behavior, that's the second and. I'm going to sort of paskin on how I'm supposed to behave. If I don't know the answer to then I can ask somebody for Pesachtin. But most things we do, if we think about it for 2 seconds, have a reasonably improved idea of how we should behave in a situation. That's the second and. But no more ands than that, because that starts to go into insanity.
You should think but not overthink.
Yes, right, and one doesn't contradict the other, right? Not overthinking is not a reason not to think, right? Okay. Okay. Walking in the Torah of Hashem. Now that we've redefined the simple words of Ashrei Tamim Midarech, meaning that the way of looking is the perfection of physical reality. And that Yaakov is a man of perfectifying. So what does walking in the Torah of Hashem mean? So when we learn Torah with power, we push ourselves a little bit. We and as much as we can in learning of the Torah. By doing so, we give power to our ability to and our situation around us, and then to receive information from our situation around us, sort of better our basic idea of what we're dealing with, as we've discussed, which is the ches in the word chen, right, which represents the chokmah, the power of, well, what is the thing that's before me? And this is what gives us chen, this is what gives us this likability. So we're kind of bringing it full circle, that we're both improving what people like in the world, but what exactly is the ripple effect? I sort of said that in a bit of a glib way before, without really defining it. We improve our own chen, what we like. Well, how does that improve what other people like? Because we become someone who's likable for the right reasons by doing that. Because what we like and what we don't like is actually for genuinely good reasons. And so when people will like us, it is in a way of elevating chen and giving power to the Malchus of Kedusha. And this is the answer to the big question at the beginning of the lesson. Well, how exactly do I get all my prayers answered, Rabbi Nachman? Because it brings about a world where the world is in a more heavenly state, where what's the main difference between the world and the heaven is problems. And if there's no problems, that's called getting your prayers answered. I think we've completed the first session.
Mazal tov. Mazal tov.
There are no